For week 4, we have a lot of games to talk about. We have decided that we will approach this with facts and with overreacts. So first, we're going to tell you the facts of the game. What happened? And then we're going to follow up with some thoughts that you could, in all fairness, classify as a steep overreaction. But that's okay, because that's what makes this fun. These are going to be some conclusions that we are jumping to after only 4 weeks of NFL football. Some of them are going to be wrong, some of them are going to be really wrong, and some of them are going to be horrendously wrong. But if so much as one of these overreacts are right, you will never hear the end of it. Let's get started with Jags at Bengals on Thursday Night Football. So, fact: the Bengals are an improved team sitting at 3-1. Burrow shows potential to be a very good quarterback. Their offensive line was just bullying the Jaguars several times throughout that game, and the announcers kept pointing out that it just looked like a losing battle for the Jaguars' defensive line. Fact: the Jaguars have led at halftime in their past 2 games to then be dominated in the second half of that game, losing both. Overreact. I see a Jaguars team that does not believe in itself. I see an undisciplined team, both on the field with the players and off the field with the coach. I won't go too in depth about that, but Urban Meyer had a little bit of a scandal this week.
Man, sorry to interrupt you. I saw a tweet that, if y'all have seen the video, you might find it funny, but there was a tweet where somebody was like, Urban was using that girl as a ventriloquist, like as a ventriloquist dummy. And I haven't been able to unsee it that way since. So if you guys have the time, check out Urban Meyer lap dance on Twitter.
Don't worry, it's PG. It's not anything that's going to
It
be
is.
super
It's not
offensive
NSFW or
but
anything.
it's
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a scandal for a team that really can't afford to have any more
for
negative
sure.
press at the moment. But these Jaguars come out to play. They go up 14-0 at the half. They get stopped on a critical 4th down to try to make it 21-0. And let's be honest, at that point in time, you just knew the Bengals were going to win the game. You knew it was over when they failed to get that 21-0 halftime lead. The Jags, they're maybe going to get, 3 wins this year if they're lucky. And it's going to require heavy injuries or team-wide dysfunction from the team that they're facing that week if they're going to get those wins. This one is probably going to be the softest of our overreacts. I don't even know if this qualifies as an overreact. Maybe how confident I am in this is the overreaction. The Jaguars are bad. They're just bad.
Yeah.
Do you have any additional thoughts on Bengals Jaguars?
I did. I had a little bit. Mine are more geared towards the Bengals as opposed to being the Jaguars. But I do agree with you. The Jags are bad, and I don't think it's an overreaction to say that this team is out of hand in a bad way. My facts: the Bengals have succeeded in spite of their poor play calling and Burrow's continued recovery from his knee surgery. I think Burrow is looking a lot better, a lot more confident and everything else. But usually it takes a full year to come back from those ACL injuries. Especially considering, there were reports that as recently as a month ago, he would lift up his leg and hop around in practice because he was so worried about getting hit. And I think that an overreact is that the Bengals are not a good team. I'm the kind of person who I'm like, their record is important. It's not always indicative of who they are. And their record does reflect a team that's ascending, but I think they play bad teams a little too closely. I don't think that they're not a good team. I think that they could be a good team, but it's too early for me to call it, man. It's too early for me to try and make any sort of type of, I don't know, final say on how I feel about them.
Next up, we have Titans versus Jets. Before I pass this off to Zach, I got to take a minute to gloat here. In my basically game picking league where I pick who is going to win these games on Saturday, I was the only person to pick the Jets. I was super proud of that. My girlfriend actually looked over at me and was like, hey, you you picked the Jets, right? I think that was an accident. And I was like, nope, that was not an accident. That was an intentional pick. She doesn't know everything about the NFL. She doesn't know all of like who's really good, who's really bad, but she knew if you pick the Jets, something must be wrong. Injuries matter. Tell us about the Titans-Jets game, Zach.
So fact on also this is a fact as well. They're no longer the Tennessee Titans. They haven't really been the Tennessee Titans for a while. So Rob, I hope you agree, but we're just going to refer to them as the Tennessee Derrick Henrys, as you said to me in the pre-planning of this video. So they're not the Titans, y'all. Anytime you hear the Derrick Henrys, just think of what used to be the Tennessee Titans. So fact, the Derrick Henrys, I might giggle for a little while saying it. The Derrick Henrys lost to what is probably the second worst team in the NFL. Fact, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Bud Dupree were all absent, and their injuries were a big factor in this loss. Overreact. The Titans, the Derrick Henrys' over-reliance on Derrick Henry, I'm playing Mad Libs right now, is both a strength and a weakness. I don't even think that's necessarily an overreaction. I think it's the truth. I don't think there's... Anyways, let me keep going. So while Derrick Henry has shown that he's a very durable individual, if he does get hurt, the Derrick Henrys are over. It's it. It's done. Because then the Derrick Henrys go to be the nothings. They'd be the Tennessee nothings because they would no longer have an offensive identity, no longer have any identity because there's nobody good enough on that defense to have an identity. So if the Derrick Henry's receivers aren't back by next week, there's a chance the Jags could beat them. I know you feel a little strongly about that, Rob, but I think it's the other way. I'm regardless of if those guys come back healthy, I think the Derrick Henrys are going to be just fine. I think that, yes, they rely too much on them, hence changing their name legally to the Tennessee Derrick Henrys. But with that said, I don't think it's too much of an overreaction that it's a bad thing, at least.
Yeah. Up next, we have Panthers at Cowboys. Panthers 28, Cowboys 36. Fact, Cowboys have had a strong start to their season. They are 3-1, having beaten an undefeated Panthers, a rising Chargers team, and the Eagles in an absolute blowout. They almost beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 1 when the Buccaneers were at full strength. Fact, the Panthers struggled without Christian McCaffrey and J.C. Horn. Their offensive line is a clear issue, and it led to 5 sacks. After a treacherously bad third quarter, however, they were able to mount a comeback and make it a one-score game with over 4 minutes remaining. So there's some good, some bad, more on the bad side, but there were some redeeming qualities. Overreact. Both of these teams will be making the playoffs this year. They may end up facing each other again. The Cowboys, at this point in time, I am comfortable saying they will win their division and they will win it handily.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The Panthers will likely be competing with the Buccaneers for the division. With the Buccaneers' heavy injuries, that is an opening for the Panthers. Now, arguably, you could say the exact same thing about the Panthers and their injuries. If not, I think the Panthers will take the wild card, probably the 7th, because you do have an NFC West division that is very strong. The Panthers played a Dallas team that looks very, very good right now. And despite having an absolute train wreck of a third quarter, their offense showed that it is capable of bringing them back into the game and positioning them to win it. Now, they couldn't really stop the Cowboys' running game, and I think that's not going to be a problem that is specific to the Panthers. That's something we're starting to see a trend of for teams that face the Cowboys. But had their defense successfully made a stop in those final 4 minutes, we would be talking about a drive to either win the game or lose the game from the Panthers offense. So I don't want to dismiss the Panthers based on that loss. I think the Cowboys are much better than we thought so at the start of the season.
I don't know.
I think this Panthers team.
I think we talked, at least on this podcast, a little bit at the beginning of the season about how the Cowboys could be a real contender and how they looked kind of scary. Unless I'm totally misremembering, but I think that was something that at least I had mentioned with you previously because I was just like, it's going to be bad for the NFC East.
I
But
think we acknowledge the talent. I think the problem is that the Cowboys have repeatedly had talent and done nothing with it.
fair,
And I
yeah.
think specifically, I think his name was it Diggs. Their
Trayvon
Cowboy, yeah,
Diggs.
Trayvon
Yeah.
Diggs. He got a lot of flack, and people were saying last year that he was one of the big weaknesses of that team and that he was a liability on the field. And it's
Yeah.
funny because he went from being their biggest liability. Right now, he's looking like a top 3 cornerback so far this year.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of unreal the development that guy
Mm-hmm.
has had. But I mean, he's Stephon Diggs' little brother.
Yeah.
So what else do we expect, right?
Yeah. And when your worst player on defense becomes your best player on defense, you're going to see a significant improvement. That is the best way that you can improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Lions Bears. So the Lions are who we thought they were. First of all, they were really bad.
Yes.
But fact, the Bears ran 39 times. Justin Fields only threw 17 times, and this was a recipe for their success. Fact, Jared Goff and Matt Stafford have damn near identical career stats. 63.7 versus 62.7 completion percentage. Both have a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, 90.5 QBR versus 91.8 QBR. Jared Goff has slightly better statistics. The difference, Matt Stafford did that with the Lions. Jared Goff did that with Sean McVay. Overreact. Justin Fields isn't the guy.
That was me
That
writing
is
that. Zach
that
doesn't
is
like
a true.
that.
And I'm not mocking Robbie. It's just that I've seen that take on Twitter a little bit. I do think that that's a major overreaction. I get it. He's not throwing the ball a lot. He doesn't have a great pocket presence, and he was coined as a bit of a project coming out. But at the same time, that Bears offense finally looked alive. That is the first time in the Matt Nagy era that anybody on the Bears has looked good, other than like David Montgomery. And then, David Montgomery, unfortunately, he had that hyperextended knee, thankfully avoided an ACL tear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they do have Damian Williams. We'll talk a little bit about him later, fishing for fantasy, plug in our later segments. But I'm not ready to call it a day or anything. I'm not really willing to say that Justin Fields is not the guy. I think Justin Fields is already showing progress and is going to become the guy. He just needs more time.
And
that's how I feel.
A kind of side note to this is when we talk about quarterback mobility, sometimes your quarterback's mobility opens up your run game, even if the quarterback isn't the one running. And it might not be a coincidence that David Montgomery had the game that he had. Sometimes just having to respect a quarterback's speed changes how you play on defense. So even if he's not necessarily having the best of games throwing, it's almost like a Lamar Jackson style effect, which I'll be talking about a lot more in depth later. So we'll hold tight on that right now. But quarterback mobility does help your running game.
For sure. Absolutely. As seen by Alfred Morris's 1,600-yard season when he was a rookie with RG3.
Mm-hmm. I do have concerns, though, about the sort of volume of the 39 rushes versus Fields throwing only 17. I think that last week Fields had a really bad game, and Nagy came into this game saying basically we're going to protect him. Against the Lions, that strategy works. We'll see how that goes. If they fall behind, they're going to kind of have to start passing a little bit more. That's why like my overreaction is that he's not the guy yet. I think he does have potential to develop and be a good prospect. I worry that the Bears will do to him what the Bears did to Mitch Trubisky, but I guess only time will tell on that one.
For sure. Absolutely. And who knows, man? Mitch Trubisky might have an opportunity here. I mean, he's playing with the Bills now. He's the backup to one of the most improved quarterbacks in the last 20 years when it comes to statistical year over end. But anyways, that's for a different day.
let's not make this a Mitch Trubisky talking.
Yeah,
podcast.
we won't, man. If we make it a Mitch Trubisky podcast, we'll have 0 listeners. Yeah. It'll be really, except for Mitch Trubisky. He might even think you guys are too high on me. You guys need to relax. I'm not that good.
Next, we have Seahawks and 49ers, 28-21 Seahawks. Now, don't let this score deceive you. This game was not as close as it looks. The
No.
49ers looked unprepared, and neither of their quarterbacks had a day that you would really want to brag and go home and tell your wife about. The difference is that one of them is a rookie with a lot of potential upside and has an excuse. The only reason this game actually looked close, and this definitely pumped up the stats a little bit, the Seahawks somehow blew a coverage so badly that Deebo Samuel, who is the San Francisco 49ers number 1 wide receiver, was so wide open on the right side of the field that they threw the ball. He literally stood still and waited for the ball to arrive, then turns around and runs to the end zone without even being touched. That is how wide open this was. This was a really bad botched play. It looks like
beauty.
The Seahawks found out like this is not going to be a 1-score game. We're going to have to change that real quick, and their defense just spotted them a quick touchdown. That's our first fact, and the 49ers were bad. Don't let the stats deceive you. Fact: the Seahawks responded from last week. Russell Wilson throws for only 149 yards, yet they win the game decisively. Now, this is something that a lot of people who are critics of the Seahawks have been saying. Let Russ cook can't be your only game plan. This is good news for Seattle fans. If Russ only has 149 yards and you're winning a game decisively, that's what you want to hear. That is good news for your team. Overreact. Jimmy G's tenure in San Francisco is probably coming to a close. You want to talk about Jimmy G, Zach? I know you have some feelings about him.
Yeah, man, I can get down with that. So I think you are not doing I think you're right. So maybe it is an overreact, but I am with you on that overreaction, man. As dedicated podcast listener and resident sports stat analyst, Sergi Feldman, he's one of our buddies here, and one of these days we're gonna get him on this podcast and have him talk about some nerdy sports things with us. He created an entire metric that looks over and takes into account all of a quarterback's like history and figures out their efficiency. And of 2 quarterbacks, I can't remember who the other one is. I think it might have been Derek Carr. 2 quarterbacks have been as close to mediocre in the NFL as anybody can be expected to, like truly the most mediocre average quarterbacks. Jimmy G was one of the 2, and it makes a ton of sense. So I am with you, Rob. I am fully expecting Jimmy G to be out next year at the latest, maybe even this year at the trade deadline. They might try and finagle a way of putting him on IR or something. That way they can just roll with Lance if they decide to go that route. But Shanahan likes to be a pain in the bum, so he's complicated. So I fully expect Jimmy D to be gone next year.
All right, next up, Zach, tell us about the Buccaneers at Patriots game.
Yeah, man, second most watched football game in the history of the NFL. Incredible. So cool. A lot of the hype leading up to the game, everybody is like Twitter was split. It was like 50% of Twitter was just like, oh man, I'm so excited. This is going to be so good, blah, 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 blah. And then like the other 50% of Twitter was just like, man, I never want to see the Patriots again. I never want to see the Buccaneers again. Throw Tom Brady into the Bermuda Triangle and see what comes out. You know what I mean?
The pits of Mordor.
Exactly. We don't need him. But honestly, it was a really fun game. It was really enjoyable. Mac Jones, here's first fact. Mac Jones statistically outplayed Tom Brady, and that is true. I don't care what you have to say. It's a fact. He had 6 more passing yards, but that wasn't the thing that kind of sticks. The thing that sticks was that completion percentage. Sure, he was dinking and dunking, but 77.5% in rain, in what's it called? Oh my gosh,
Sleet?
Gillette Stadium. Yeah, sleet even. Yeah, in Gillette Stadium, 77.5% is pretty incredible, especially after Tom Brady had spent almost all of his career in those same conditions.
Right.
And Tom Brady only had 51% of his passes completed. He didn't need to complete 60 or 70 to win the game, but it was pretty incredible that Mac did all that while getting hit the entire game too.
Yeah. 4 sacks.
Fact number 2. Yeah, man, it was bad. He was getting knocked out. Fact 2. The Buccaneers have an injury problem. Their defense does have a ton of players out, specifically at the corner position,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just more injury. They had 2 more injuries on Sunday, so it's just like no matter what's going down with them, there's an injury. It seems to be, and it
Richard
is.
Sherman, by the way, was brought up off of his couch, and he said, "I need a couple weeks to get ready." And they were like, "Can you start tonight?" And he
And he was
started.
just like, I guess I have to, right? But yeah, so that's fact number 2. Overreact. Mac Jones looks like a big boy starting quarterback. He impressed me. He's a rookie, but he did impress me. He impressed Rob too. Rob was the one who actually wrote out most of this
Mm-hmm.
segment here. He played great through terrible Foxborough weather, and that's something, as we had just said, that Brady should have been better at doing, considering his entire career was pretty much spent there. So Bill Belichick might have found his opportunity here for another quarterback going forward. He might have another really, really solid person. And, I'm not going to say he's another Tom Brady, but he could have a Drew Brees on his hands. And that's the truth here. A Drew Brees who, you know, is, I don't know how to explain it. He's like Tom Brady's goofy little brother, but he's still making it work. What do you have to say, though, Rob?
Yeah, I definitely feel like Mac Jones is starting to look like a big boy quarterback. Now, the Bucks were not the best NFL team last year. I know this is something that you had mentioned too. They weren't the best team last year. They aren't the best team this year. It's visible. They're not the best. They're probably going to have a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover as well. Mac Jones looking very good. He's looking like he could potentially be their next Tom Brady. And if you think that is a big overreact, wait till you hear what I have to say about our next game. Raiders Chargers 14-28. Chargers win. Fact: Chargers dominated the first half 21-0. Poor play in the first half is starting to become the Raiders' calling card, and that's not something that you want. Their halftime adjustments, you can't overcome a 21-point deficit in the NFL against good teams. Can you do it against the Jacksonville Jaguars? Obviously, yes. Can you do it against the Chargers? No. No,
You do it
you
against the Atlanta
cannot.
Falcons in the Super Bowl?
Right.
You can.
Fact: they have now beaten the Chiefs and Raiders in back-to-back weeks. Herbert is the human cannon, and this defense looks incredibly impressive. Their only loss has been to the Cowboys, who right now, they're looking like a bunch of studs. So something that I heard earlier today from Colin Cowherd, of the 4 opponents that the Chargers have played, their lowest scoring game of the season for all 4 of those teams was against the Chargers. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that the Chargers have a defense this year. And we know that they have an offense because we know all their weapons. So I hope you're ready for this spicy, steaming, hot take. Overreact. The Chargers are the best team in the AFC West. They're better than the Broncos. They're better than the Raiders. Pause for effect. They're better than the Chiefs.
Boom.
You don't at me on the Twitter I don't have, okay? Look, the Broncos exposed by the Ravens. Not just their play, but also their coach's temperament. Absolutely exposed. More on that later. The Chiefs' defense is abysmal. I'm bringing out the big boy vocab words. That's how bad the Chiefs' defense is. It is single-handedly costing the best, most explosive offense in the league games. They're 2-2. They should not be 2-2 with that offense. The Raiders, hot and cold. They suffer from inconsistency. Why can't you play football in the first half of games? What's wrong with your team? Why are you a second half only team? There are 4 quarters. You can't show up and play 2 quarters against good teams. The Chargers are a good team on all fronts. They have the offensive playmakers. They have the defense. Even their special teams looked good. This team is going to win the AFC West. Overreact. I'm doing it. Okay? I'm doing it.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair. And just, I don't have much to add, but I will ask, this might have been pre your time being a football fan, but do you remember when the Chargers were first ranked in the NFL in offense, defense, and special teams, and they missed the playoffs?
Which year was that?
That was like '08. They were like the number one statistical team either in '08 or
That's
'09
funny.
in every category, and they missed the playoffs in the last game of the season. So Chargers fans need this. They need us to
Yeah.
rally them as that best team in the league.
They for the longest time have lost games by less than one score. Phillip
man.
Rivers was just known for not being able to clutch it in the fourth quarter. I'm happy for them. I hope they take the division. I hope they make a run.
Same. If I ever leave WFT, man, that's probably who it's for, is the Chargers.